Hey guys, what's up? It's Thomas. Tonight, we're here with Extra History. Well, since they've done this, but why not, right? Anyway, starting with our most recent completed one, Crimean War. Okay, World War Zero, what the first one's called. So yeah, basically think of this as Proto World War One, as in there are a lot of nations involved, and it essentially sets up a lot of like the future stuff going on. All in the Crimea, from what I remember. I think there's a lot more to it, but I guess we'll come to it when we get there. But for now, get this first part out of the way and see how this whole war started. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go.
Jerusalem, Good Friday, 1846. Pilgrims and priests thronged the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, eager to pray at the site of Christ's crucifixion. Now, most of the time, Holy Week falls separately on the Catholic and Orthodox religious calendars, but this year they coincide and everyone's here at once.
Really?
It's packed, and they're shouting. The Orthodox priests arrived first, putting their altar cloth on the altar. Then the Catholics, furious, try to yank it off and replace it with their own. Both insist they have a document from the Ottoman Sultan supporting their right, and suddenly a monk throws a punch. Within seconds, the seething crowd are shoving and kicking, smashing each other with crucifixes and candlesticks. Turkish bodyguards hired by wealthy pilgrims lay in with clubs. A priest swings an incense burner like a morning star, and people start drawing pistols. By the time Ottoman troops regain control, 40 people are dead. Welcome to the start of the First Modern War.
Too much. Over the top, huh?
As soon as you're done watching this episode, episode 2 is already up a week early and ad-free over on Nebula. Stick around to the end for a teaser. The Crimean War is perhaps the most poorly named conflict in history. From its name, you might think that it was fought to settle a dispute over the Crimean Peninsula. It wasn't. Or you might assume that Crimea was the most important front of the war, but you'd be wrong again. Clashes also occurred along the Danube, in what's now Romania, in the Baltic Sea, and even in the far North Pacific. And though the land operations in Crimea are the most famous, it was the naval operations that actually won the war. In fact, historians have even proposed, mostly hypothetically mind you, that it be renamed the Baltic War, or the Great Russian War, or even World War Zero. See, the Crimean War was...
Honestly, the World War Zero one makes sense. This is kind of a prototype World War, you know, said earlier. You know, you have Britain, French, Russian troops in that area, which they would come back for in World War One. So, again, the British, French, and Russians on the same side, the Ottomans. And I think you can see what's up, right? Anyway, moving on.
Fought all across Europe, with Russia facing off against an allied coalition including the UK, France, and the Ottoman Empire. But it was also the first
the Ottomans and Russians
a conflict that began looking like the Napoleonic past, but by its end presaged the industrial slaughter of World War I. It would be the first steam-powered war, the first telegraph war, the first war with photographs and war correspondence, and it would kill at least 500,000 people. And supposedly, it all started over who got to hold a pair of keys. Now, deadly brawls at holy sites, like the one in this episode's opening, were not unusual in Ottoman-controlled Palestine. For centuries, pilgrimage sites had flip-flopped between the Catholic and Orthodox churches based on whichever faction obtained a decree from the Sultan.
Christian
But
schisms,
in
am I right?
1757, the Ottomans finally had enough and decreed a status quo, in which all 6 Christian churches would receive access to the religious sites and shared responsibility for their upkeep. And to give you an idea of how seriously this is taken, get this. When the status quo was declared, it stated that nothing in a site could be changed without the churches all agreeing to it. And as you can imagine, getting full agreement proved nearly impossible. Hence, things like this happened. The day before the decree, a workman left his ladder at one of the churches, and it's been there ever since, to this day. Things became even more complicated.
Like, you know it's a bad schism when you couldn't even agree to get the ladder down. Like, seriously. You could have just went to the churches and like, hey, yo, can I have my ladder back? It's been like 100 years at this point. They're just still like, no, not until they agree to follow our decree. Seriously, like, come on, guys, just let the guy have his ladder back. Messed up. Honestly, sheesh, this is why you gotta bring your stuff home. Otherwise, stuff like that could happen. Like, I'm not saying will happen, but could, you know? A worker. I hope the church is, you know, compensated for the lost ladder. Like, that's messed up. Anyway,
when Catholic France, who mostly had custody of these sites via treaties, turned away from religion during the Revolutionary period, and Eastern Orthodox Christians stepped in to fill the power vacuum. Then when the French returned to Palestine in the 1830s, a series of confrontations over the sites followed.
Oh boy.
Groups warred over who would get to fix structures, since maintenance legally implied ownership. Things got tense. In 1842,
And this is
the
why you
Orthodox
gotta go over
Church
the majority
erected a
rule.
wall in the Church of the Nativity, blocking Catholic access to the shrine of Jesus' birthplace. 5 years
Yeah,
later,
that's
they
messed up.
pried up a silver star that French Catholics had put there. But the nastiest conflict was over keys.
Oh yeah, the two
By
keys.
tradition, the Orthodox monks kept the keys to the church's front door, with the Catholics possessing a less prestigious key to an interior door. Angry at this
Ouch.
slight, the two groups started a brawl in 1852 that killed several Orthodox monks. So in response to these worsening brawls, 2 men intervened in the conflict. Nicholas
oughta be good.
I, Tsar of Russia, and Napoleon III, recently crowned Emperor of France. But let's start with Nicholas
story
I,
there. Let's
who
go with
was
Nicholas.
largely responsible for starting the war. By 1852, Nicholas had been on the
26 years.
throne for 26 years and held sway over the fastest-growing empire in Europe. A military man, he grew up fascinated by his father's generals, dressed in impeccable uniforms, and slept on a cot. But perhaps Nicholas's most prominent
with the
feature
military,
was
right?
his near-religious belief in restoring the Russian Empire to its former glory. See, Nicholas believed that as the last Orthodox power, Russia was the heir of Byzantium and Rome. And as head of the Russian Orthodox Church, he considered himself the protector of Orthodox Christians worldwide, including in Ottoman territory, where they did indeed experience state-sponsored oppression and at times were massacred. He regularly backed Christian uprisings in Ottoman territory, such as the Greek War of Independence in 1821. This belief went hand in hand with Russia's expansionist policies, which had spent nearly a century taking bites out of Ottoman territory. Though often done with the stated goal of protecting Orthodox Christians, these were also about expansion south. Catherine the Great herself started this pattern by capturing the Crimean Peninsula and its warm water port of Sevastopol. That port gave Russia a path to the Mediterranean, provided they passed through Ottoman territory. These lands were not only important for reaching ports, though. Nicholas also feared the increasing liberalism of the West, which he felt would undermine Russia's autocratic policies, and he wanted a strong Russia with buffer zones to keep the West at bay. Yeah, and if this is all sounding a bit familiar, a lot of historians have pointed out the parallels to recent events. In fact, Crimea itself, while internationally recognized as part of Ukraine, has been occupied by Russia since 2014. Actually, though, now that we're on the subject, as a quick aside, it did feel wrong to do this series without at least
the Ukraine invasion.
ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine in today's day and age. One of the saddest aspects of which has been its impact on civilians. And to that end, myself and several of our team have made donations to Doctors Without Borders, who are providing treatment to civilians within Ukraine being affected by the war, ranging from emergency medicine to psychotherapy to medical evacuation. They're also working with communities of displaced Ukrainians currently residing in neighboring countries as well. So if you'd like to chip in and you are able, we'll put a link in the description to where you can help them out with all of that. Sorry for interrupting the history. It just felt
it's okay.
And
It needed to be said.
To be done. But I digress. Russian expansion during the 18th and 19th centuries vastly weakened
the Empire is like stuff with the big red dog.
to Nicholas, there was only one way it would end. During a meeting with British officials in 1844, he referred to the Ottoman Empire as a sick man, a man dying. And when that man died, he said, the powers would have to figure out what action to take. This became known as the Eastern Question. What should Europe do about the seemingly crumbling Ottomans? Nicholas wanted to partition the Ottoman Empire, or, to have Russia take it over entirely. And he saw Britain as a potential ally in this, believing that the British would be happy to see the Ottomans fall, and that after any partition, they would naturally back Russia's claim over the holy sites. I mean, the UK wouldn't side with France, right? Especially not while it's governed by Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew. Though in this line of thinking, he was vastly mistaken.
Yeah, they already allied.
Britain increasingly saw Russia as the danger, not France. Also at the time, Russia and Britain were engaged in sort of a Cold War, known as the Great Game, each trying to influence governments in Central Asia. The British government also harbored fears that Russia planned to move on India, and worried that if the Ottoman Empire collapsed, Russia's dominance of the East would upset the post-war Napoleonic balance of powers. In other words, the British were committed to keeping Turkey around as a check against Russia, and even supported that by pushing the Ottomans into a reform program meant to strengthen the state. But Britain's biggest worry were Russian naval bases in Crimea. Using them, Russia could launch a strike against Istanbul before France or Britain could dispatch a fleet to defend it, effectively collapsing the Ottoman state at will. By contrast,
Yeah, they
on
better
the
help.
other side of this religious issue was
Nicholas
Napoleon
to
III,
Napoleon.
who'd been elected the first president of France in 1848. However, then in
But,
1852,
yeah.
he'd lost the election, and instead of conceding, just declared himself
Emperor.
However, his coup was on shaky ground and depended heavily on the support of traditional Catholics. So, in an attempt to mollify this political bloc and bring France back to its international standing, he dispatched a famously confrontational diplomat to the Ottoman court in order to insist that a 1740 treaty granted France the right to govern holy sites. Then, when the Ottomans agreed with France, an equally inflammatory Russian ambassador countered with a claim based on treaties they claimed nullified that 1740 treaty. So now the Ottomans, fearing Russia might actually declare war, switched their position and granted them the holy sites. Not ready to back down and to prove a point, France then dispatched the 80-gun warship Charlemagne to sail into the Black Sea. A clear violation of treaties that stated warships could not do this in peacetime. Unable to resist this act of gunboat diplomacy, the Ottomans then switched their position again, renaming France the protector of the holy sites, to
from
which
France
Russia
to Russia back to France.
Invasion.
Sheesh,
In
Ottomans,
July
make your mind up.
1853, Russian troops surged across the Danube, occupying the territories of
Thus,
Wallachia and
the war
Moldavia, which were
begins.
jointly governed by Russia and the Ottomans. And at this point, Nicholas considered the war as good as over, certain that Britain and France would not support the Turks against fellow Europeans. He was wrong again. On October 16th, the Ottomans, with the support of Britain and France, declared war on Russia. World War Zero had begun, and we'll get into all those details next week. Wait, narrative Matt, what do you mean next?
Oh, yeah, we know where that's going, the Nebula deal. I'm not gonna spoil myself, but you guys know the deal, right? Okay. So, looks like Russians, I guess they, got screwed up and realized, I guess they aren't gonna play our game. Whoops! Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Till next time, like, subscribe for more. See ya.